Hey there, so I'm back with yet another book. So this is another classic that I've never heard of this book before. And somebody, Dawn, I think his name is, recommended in the comment section of a previous video that I should take a look at this. And I did, and I'm glad I did. And then I posted on my Facebook page that I bought this book, and I was surprised how many of my friends that knew about this book. I've actually never heard of it, and well, I guess 95% of my friends on Facebook are guitar players, but that's another story. So then there is some controversy. Somebody said that he actually met Pat Martino, and that he said that he didn't write this book. I don't know if that's true, but I guess it's co-written with this guy, Tony Baruso. And also I see that Don Mock has been a consultant. So it might be true that maybe Pat Martino himself didn't have too much to say about this book. I don't know. Nonetheless, it's a great book, and it really gives you an insight into Pat Martino's lines. I guess we all want those fast bebop jazz kind of lines, right? So myself, I love Pat Martino's playing, and I love players like George Benson who can pull off these fast double time kind of lines, and it's not just gonna happen out of nowhere. Like, you're just not gonna come up with them from nothing, right? You have to kind of work it out, just like a dancer works on his or her routines and choreography. Like, it's not gonna just appear out of nowhere. You need to figure out how to play your lines, and this could be a great inspiration in how he creates his lines. And you can also, from that, I guess, come up with your own lines, and you can mix his lines with your own lines and so on. So let me go over briefly what the idea is in this book. So what he does, he takes a minor chord, G minor, I guess it's a drop 2, right? And then he takes the inversions and back to the same root position. I'm kind of assuming that most of you watching this know what this is. It's a G minor and its inversions. And then if you think of those as shapes on the actual fretboard, you can create lines or licks around those shapes so that you're kind of targeting the important notes, as it were, and then you're kind of visualizing the fretboard and thinking of those licks that he calls activities, how they relate to that shape, so that when you see a shape, you know that the lines around that. So the first lick is this one. Then I guess it divides it in ascending and descending too, so that you can connect them later on. So there's a mix of scales, arpeggios, and chromaticism and little things that he seems to favor, like Sounds very Pat Martino. I personally prefer so I would probably change that, and that, I think that's a good idea to change it after your own taste. Then there's a next phrase and surrounding the next shape. So I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter than it is in the actual book. So I'm not gonna give you these licks in PDF format or anything because of copyright reasons, obviously. And this book is very inexpensive, so, and it's easy to find. I had no problem finding it, so if you like this, you should get the book. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take that lick, make it a little bit shorter, and then I'm gonna play that over Blue Bossa. So the first chord obviously is C minor. So I'm thinking of this shape surrounding the first inversion. Then we have F minor. And here's the thing, the next chord is D minor 7 flat 5, which is very close to F minor, or it's an F minor 6. And that's the point he makes in this book, that you can use the same material over many different chords, which you could argue, but for now we're just gonna take that as truth and apply the same lick over the D minor 7 flat 5. So the F minor lick, or activity, line, whatever you want to call it, also works over the D minor 7 flat 5. In this case, I think it works perfectly, but you have to use your discretion because not always is this going to be true, in my opinion. I would disagree with the book a little bit there, that it depends. But the idea is that you already know a whole bunch of stuff that you can just transfer kind of to the next chord without having to learn that new material or whatever. You already have a bunch of material. So I'm going to do that, and then we're back in C minor. Then we have an E flat minor, A flat. Then I'm going to play it here. It also works over D flat major 7, because if I take a B flat minor chord in first inversion, it's very close to a D flat major 7. So I can play that material or activity over that chord. And again, doesn't always work in my opinion, but in this case it does work. And then we're back. And then you could mix it in with stuff that you already know, like I can mix it in with my G altered or G dominant kind of stuff. Now we have a G7. Or whatever. So I'll play it over the backing track. I'm back in my apartment in Stockholm now, so I don't have my usual gear. I'm kind of doing a budget thing here, so I'm using my recently acquired iReal book, and here is Jazz Bossa Nova, Blue Bossa. So I hope what you see what I did there. I was just using one line to navigate through Blue Bossa, the changes of Blue Bossa, and so they're kind of double time, kind of fast lines, right? And I think it's fun. I was a little bit skeptical when I first got this book, but I think I've been practicing this kind of this week. I have a week off because of Easter break, and it's a lot of fun because it feels like you're Pat Martino kind of, and it's more fun than just scales and arpeggios because there's this musical aspect to it. You have to kind of come up with a nice shape to your line or whatever, and it's also a good technique exercise to play, see what tempo. I was playing it fairly fast, so I mean, if I'm playing double time, right? So this could be a great way to improve your double time. Okay, so kind of also when I'm working on these lines, I'm thinking about how I want to pick them, and they're great for the kind of playing that I do, which is a combination of picking and legato and a little bit of everything. So I can kind of work on my technique and figure out how to play them so that it sounds like jazz. Because if you're picking every note, it doesn't sound like jazz, in my opinion. And so it's good for that. And now, I think a lot of you are thinking, well, it's kind of not very advanced to just move the same shape around like that. So that's why you want to be able to combine all the different licks that he's suggesting. So the idea is to stay in an area of the fretboard, which is a challenge for us guitar players, right? So let's say that I would start with that lick that I did. I'm here. The closest voicing for the F minor would be this one. And the what do you call it? Activity that he suggests for that chord is this. Again, I'm making them a little bit shorter because I don't think they should be that long. I remember Scott Henderson told me when I studied with him that you should always keep your licks short so that you can manipulate them and kind of move in and out of them instead of just memorizing long. So I think he would have a problem with this book because of that. But anyway, that's the chord or the activity for that chord. So far we have this. And then I'm gonna play another one for the just to mix it up. Oh, how is what? So all these are in the book as licks, right? And funny thing is that he writes them out as notation, really bad notation. If I am to give some criticism to this book, I don't know why you would. He writes them out as notation and then a fretboard with like numbers, which is really annoying. I think, like, why wouldn't you write tabs? Or the notation is bad. There's this A minor example where he writes G flat instead of F sharp, and I mean, maybe Pat Martino doesn't know how to write music. That actually, I don't know. There's a lot of great musicians who don't know how to write music. So far we got this. For the C minor, for the F minor, and for the D minor 7 flat 5. That's my favorite of all of them. Great lick, very bebop-y, Pat Martino sounding. Love it. And then we're back to C minor, E flat minor. I'm gonna play the last one in the book, or the last example. It's a great one for sliding and kind of. You could almost play it with your fingers. I said too much there. because they're very user friendly for my technique. I guess I have the same kind of technique as Pat Martino. I've never really studied his playing closely, to be honest. So then we have D flat major, same as before, and then D split. That one I can easily combine with some kind of G dominant material. So I'll play the whole thing over the back for you. Okay, so I'm kind of mixing it up with stuff that I already know because I can do that, and I guess that's the great thing about this. Like if you already know a whole bunch of stuff and have material licks, you can just mix it in. And that's the idea, I guess, that you need to be able to have tons of phrases like this that you can just go in and out of and mix them. And so, who should get this book? That's why it's difficult when I'm not teaching you in person, because I don't know where you are, as it were. Let's say your playing is very licks based already, that you're just kind of playing scales up and down and patterns and licks, which is great, but then you might not need this book. You need to work on other stuff and creativity and phrasing and rhythmic ideas, and because there are no rhythms here. They're just like eighth notes or 16th notes lines. And again, you kind of need that, but you also need to be able to play more musical stuff, I guess you could call it. Some players tend to do this more than others. So players like Jim Hall and Bill Frisell, they don't do a whole lot of those kind of fast lines. And some people seem to think that that's kind of better, and I just don't agree with that. I think it's just different, how different players are different. But obviously, if all you have in your playing is a bunch of licks and fast lines, it's going to be boring. That's not what creates a great player. You need to have good timing, good phrasing, be able to interact with musicians and what's going on, having some kind of sense of adventure in your playing, and it should be exciting, right? So this is just one tool. But if let's say you're practicing your bob scales and you're practicing your arpeggios and your scales, and you're kind of bored with it, and you think, how can I make it more sound like real jazz or something like that, then this book could be great for you. And I think it's fun, but it's very different than a book like Mick Goodrick's book. Mick Goodrick is just presenting a bunch of musical concepts that you need to figure out how to apply to your own playing. It doesn't give you any licks or anything like that. They're more concepts. And then there are books that are method books, like do this exercise, and then when you finish with that exercise, do this one. This is more of like a hands-on book that you can improve your playing instantly. And I guess some people are afraid of this kind of book because they think like, oh, I'm gonna sound like Pat Martino if I play this. Like, I don't think so, because so many players have used this book and they don't sound like Pat Martino. And by the way, what's wrong with sounding like Pat Martino? I would love to sound like Pat Martino. So then, anyway, there are more studies at the end of the book where he combines the different licks over different chord progressions. It's not a whole lot in this book, but it was pretty inexpensive. So the idea that I think the point that this book is kind of trying to make is that you can play your materials that you already know over other chords. Because when you're playing, that's how I interpret this. When you're playing, there's something called instinct, right? Like you hear a sound, you see a chord, and your fingers just respond to it. So you can develop that instinct. And you don't have to study or to practice every mode and every chord, and because you already know a whole bunch of stuff that you can just apply to this other chord. And then there are some teachers that would disagree with that you need to practice F minor, Dorian, and D Locrian, right? They're different, the same notes, but they are different sounds because the gravity of the notes changes, right? But so I think you should do both. This is a great tool to think like that, but you shouldn't rely on that alone. You should also work on every mode. And I disagree with some of the stuff that you can use, let's say, your F Dorian over an altered sound or something. It's like, yeah, I don't know about that. But there is such a thing as instinct when you're playing, because if you're practicing your bop scales and your arpeggios, you have to think, and I think there's this risk that if you're in the wrong kind of headspace when you're thinking about the scales, we tend to overthink. I think for those of you who have been to jazz college or jazz school, you all know this kind of guy or girl who never practiced. Let's say you're practicing like I did. I practiced like crazy when I went to jazz college. Then there was this guy who never practiced. But every time we played, he just sounded great because he was just playing. He wasn't overthinking, right? So that was so frustrating because I was like, I'm practicing all this stuff. I should sound better. But it doesn't work like that. You also need to just play. And so this book could be a good alternative to kind of, if you're spending all day thinking about your scales and stuff. This is something very user-friendly that it will improve your playing fast. So yeah, that's what I had to say about this book. I strongly recommend it, but if you're like looking for some kind of Mick Goodrick or that kind of book, then this is not the book for you, perhaps. Yeah, thanks for recommending it. And I love when you guys recommend books. I have more recommendations from you guys, and I'm gonna order all those books because I love it. So with that, I shall see you next time.